Hey guys, I'm Randy.
And I'm Daniel.
We're two lifelong friends and musicians, but when we're not playing gigs, we like to talk games.
And today on the Gaming Gig Podcast, we're talking about Dave the Diver and what the heck is an indie. Randy, I'm upset.
You're upset? How are you upset?
I'm upset because all this controversy about Dave the Diver makes me sad and anxious because I think it's such a great game and it makes me sad.
It is sad that a good game is in the middle of a bunch of controversy, but I think that this is a good question because it seems like there is some maybe systematic problems with what indie games are. Because obviously Dave the Diver got nominated for Indie Game of the Year at the Game Awards, and that has caused a whole thing.
Yeah, everybody's up in arms. And do you want to go over the poll results before we get into the nitty gritty here, or do you want to preface?
Well, first I just want to say, why is this even a thing? If you're not into the kind of the inside stuff in gaming, you may be wondering why this is a problem. Because if you look at a game like Dave the Diver, you might think, I think that's probably an indie game.
You think, look at all that pixel art.
Right, it's pixel art. That's one of the big things. So Dave the Diver was created by a small team called Mint Rocket.
Yes.
And it is a smaller team, but it's kind of like a subsection of a very large Korean company called Nexon. And they're a huge multi-billion-dollar game publishing company. So it's...
They've got a buck or two.
Right. And so Dave the Diver, although made from a small team, definitely had a lot of resources, funding from this huge company. So it's not an independently made game.
Yeah. Well, at least not an independently published game. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah. At least not independently published. And also it had a lot more resources and stuff that an indie studio, a traditional, what you might consider to be indie studio, wouldn't have.
Right.
So that's why it has caused all this controversy, and it's caused this conversation of what is an indie game. And what I found through thinking about this over the last week is that it's a little more complex than you might initially think.
Yeah. I think, and I think I've kind of been floating through life with my head in the clouds all willy-nilly and just kind of thinking kind of like a lot of people. Look at all them pixels,
Right.
That must be indie. But...
it's not that simple.
It's not that simple.
It's really not that simple, and we'll get into all that today. So let's start with this first poll where I put out said, do you consider Dave the Diver to be an indie game?
Yeah, at 37% people said yes, and at 63% people said no. So much more people said no, but it's not completely one-sided.
It's not one-sided, and I think that also this poll was after the fact that everyone kind of started to realize that, wait, maybe this isn't an indie game. I think if you hadn't done the research and found out that it was backed by a huge company, you might just assume it was. And that, if we had done this poll before the controversy, I could totally see it being swapped the other way around.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, we even briefly discussed it on this podcast because you heard something about that.
Yeah, I did.
And then I Googled it real quick and we just found Mint Rocket and we moved on.
We were like, oh yeah, that's okay. Maybe it is an indie. I've never heard of Mint Rocket.
Yeah. But, it's deeper than that. So
it's much deeper than that.
Before we get into some comments, though, we do want to tell you guys, we have a Discord server. It's a really cool place to hang out and talk games, and you get first dibs if you want your comment featured on the Gaming Gig Podcast.
All right, I go there first. And speaking of, we're going to start with a comment from our Discord channel. We got the Laninator who said, I've always considered indie games to mean what they say, independently published, and Dave the Diver is not. But that also means that by definition, Baldur's Gate 3 is an indie game, which it had a massive budget. It is a bit of a blurry line. If this continues, I think maybe we need to think about indie games not in terms of who published them, but what the overall budget was, because I think the whole point of the indie scene is to give the nod to low-budget passion projects by small studios.
Yeah, I think Laninator, again, hit us with a pretty intelligent comment.
As he typically does.
He tends to do that.
He tends to.
And he's right. Baldur's Gate 3, massive.
Massive. It was, independently published, but it had a budget of $100 million. That is by no means an indie game, as we would think of being an indie game.
And I don't think Dave the Diver had a $100 million budget. I can't speak to that
I doubt it.
with actual facts, but I certainly would be shocked if it did.
But I would say, there's probably a decent chance that it had, I don't know, we should Google search it and see if it's a thing. Because what if it had $1 million budget? What if it did?
Where do you draw the line?
Where do you draw the line? And we'll get to that in a minute. But I actually, in terms of what you're saying, Laninator, in terms of you can't just go with independently published because Nintendo independently publishes their games. So you can't.
Yeah, we were talking about this before we started rolling. Like,
Yeah.
what if Tears of the Kingdom was an indie game of the year?
Right.
Like,
It can't be, right? So you can't just go with independently published because there are tons of games that are independently published by huge publishing companies. So you have to decide where is the line, because small publishing, if you independently publish it and you're a small, publisher, it can still be considered indie. And so I think the idea of using the overall budget, that's not a bad idea, but it is definitely a blurry line. So do you have any hard numbers on what Dave the Diver's budget was?
I mean, I'm hearing some pretty steady, less than 10 million.
Oh, so it's still a multi-million-dollar game.
Well, I mean, these are not like from Nexon, or Mint Rocket. So I don't know exactly, but this one guy's estimating around 1.8, so 1 to 2 million.
Okay.
I mean,
I wouldn't be surprised that it had $1 million behind it. Looking at the quality of the game, I wouldn't be surprised by that. But that being said, there are lots of indie games who have significantly less money than that in it.
Yeah, and there looks like in the credits there's 29 core developers, but there's also like 100 plus other people, like special thanks and things like that. So, I mean, small team compared to something like Baldur's Gate, I'm sure, but maybe not as small as something like a Stardew, which, again, later got picked up by some big...
And published by big companies. So, yeah. Anyways, so we were talking about, on our Discord channel, we were kind of having this conversation about Dave the Diver, and I said, what if you consider it an indie-like? Let's put that... And... Punished Skull had a comment about that.
Yeah, Punished said, I suppose, but that could be a bad thing. If big devs start making indie-like games, that could hurt actual indie devs. Which is true.
It is true. I mean, that's kind of what we're seeing here. In terms of like hurt them, I don't know about hurt them, but it would definitely hurt them when it comes to like awards season. If they're,
I think, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but I was saying, I think John from Good Bobs said something about, what if Nintendo went back and made like a super pixel arty Zelda? And called it an indie-like. And
they've kind of already done that in a way with the Cadence of Hyrule thing, where we had...
I think he brought that up
that's kind of been that's already... Now, that was obviously the company that put that together was a fairly independently small, developer, but it was published and it had backing and funding from Nintendo. So it's obviously the IP, and that's Zelda. I mean, it's huge.
Yeah. We might need to have like a blacklisted list of IPs that can't make indies.
Right.
No Marios, no Zeldas, no Final Fantasies, all that.
But that being said, I really like the idea, kind of like, I do think that it could hurt indie devs if like big companies start making indie likes. I do think that could potentially, step on their toes a little bit, I guess. But I do like the idea that big developers don't always have to be making huge projects. Like I'm tired of only seeing AAA games that are, got these huge hundreds of $1 million budget, like we don't need that.
Yeah. And you said before we started rolling, what if we had like a AA category at the Game Awards,
right.
AA of the year, or, like Leninator said, passion project of the year. And the criteria includes like, can't have a budget above this,
right.
Cause I agree with what he said, that I think the whole indie idea is about like those passion project games that maybe don't have the scope or the resources, put into them of a AAA. So that kind of goes with what you're saying about indie-like.
Yeah. But I don't know. I do like the idea of big publishers making smaller games, but I don't know. They definitely shouldn't be nominated for Indie Game of the Year, though. At the same way, just because I like the idea of them not having to always do big projects doesn't mean that they need to be nominated for what should be like pointing out great work by people with very small budgets making games as passion projects. Yeah.
And this kind of goes into our next comment here by Vladik, who said, honestly, he's just glad it got some sort of nomination, which
that's kind of where you are. That's where you are. Yeah,
It's such a good game. It deserves a nomination. Where else is it going to go? And you said, well, Game of the Year if it's that good.
Right.
I mean, and I see that. I see that point. But
usually an indie game does get nominated for Game of the Year.
Yeah. And I don't even think if Dave the Diver is indie, I still don't even think it's the best indie game of the year because I think Sea of Stars is. But it's a lot closer than I expected it to be. So should it be in Game of the Year? I would still say no, but does it deserve to get some sort of nod? Yes. Is it an indie game? I guess not. Damn.
No, I don't think it is. In terms of like our opinion on like is it an indie
Yeah.
game? Like I know we don't have to have the same opinion, but I think
I don't think
it is
it is.
definitely not an indie.
It just
game.
hurts me, but I don't think it is.
It's indie-like. It's not an indie game. But
Yeah.
what is an indie game? We'll get into that. But first, I want to tell you guys about our Twitch channel. We stream on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern. There's a link to the Twitch channel in the description of wherever you get this podcast. We'd love for you to come hang out with us.
That's right. We're playing Baldur's Gate. Sometimes we're even playing music on there. It's just like a big variety show these days.
Some Sea of Thieves.
Sea of Thieves.
Just all kinds of stuff.
It's a good time. All right, we got us another poll here. We asked the Gaming Geek Faithful. We said, how do you define an indie then, since you know so much? And at 44%, people said a game that's self-published. And I love the Super Meat Boy picture there. At 6%, people said a game made with a small budget, with a nod to Vampire Survivors. Oh. At 29%, we got a game made by a small team, with the ever-faithful Stardew. And at 21%, people said, I don't know, I just know it when I see it. Buddy, like, dang, get off my back.
Yeah, so the big answer was a game that's self-published, which is the like that's kind of the definitive answer, I guess, if you had to be like really strict about it.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't work. It just if you say it's self-published, it just doesn't. If you're really strict with that, it doesn't work.
I guess not anymore.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave.
Well, I mean, like Dave 1 isn't self-published anyway.
That's what I'm saying.
But if you say like a game that is self-published, you know, like we
like
brought
Baldur's
up
Gate.
like Baldur's Gate,
Yeah.
and we brought up, you know, like tons of Nintendo games. I mean, there's all kinds of games that are developed and published by the same company, and they are not indie games. So that, although that would
Or
be,
are they?
Or are they? You know, this I was surprised that the smallest percentage went towards a game made with a small budget.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, that is the only thing that you could like literally draw a line in the sand and say, okay, if your game costs more than this to make, of course that line I guess would have to continuously move in because of inflation or whatever. But
Yeah,
you can
gameflation.
you could draw a line in the sand and say if your game costs more than this, it's not an indie game.
And I think that's the point.
Right.
I do think that's the point. Like, yeah, maybe we have defined it as independently published for a long time. But I think the point is those independent publishers don't have the same money and same resources the big boys do.
Right.
That's why we're giving them a nod, you know?
Right. But see, the thing is, and you could have like the second biggest one was a game made by a small team, and that kind of makes sense to me in a lot of ways because you could have, you know, say you have an independent developer, you know, they have a small team, but then it gets picked up and published by a big, you know, publisher. I still consider, in my mind, I still consider that to be an indie game if it really was made with a very small team and small budget. You know, I don't think it matters who publishes it personally. Because like you can say like Stardew Valley, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're saying it doesn't matter who publishes it eventually.
Well, yeah. I could even see like if like we brought up Roller Coaster Tycoon.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a game made by literal one person. But it was published by, I don't know, I think it was like, I don't remember who
We
published
don't
it.
have to guess.
A big company published Roller Coaster Tycoon is the point. And, you know, but it was made by one person. So in my mind, Roller Coaster Tycoon was still an indie game, like especially that first one.
Hasbro Interactive.
Yeah, published by Hasbro. I mean, come on. Huge.
I've heard of them.
I've heard of them, yeah. So, you know, I don't know. It's tough. It's really tough. So
Because, I mean, how big can the team be?
how big can the team be? Right? I saw people in the comments saying, like, if it's made with more than 5 people, it's not an indie. I mean, like...
That's small.
Yeah, but say you have a team of 100 people, but they're all, like, doing it as a passion project, and they're not getting paid to do it. Could that be an indie?
I don't know, bro. I don't know. I don't know anything anymore.
I don't know. It's really, really tough. We got comments here. Maybe these comments will help us decide
I sure hope
what
so.
an indie game is.
We got one here from Loves M&M's. Loves M&M's said, to me, indie means independent, so being self-published would be the definition. Usually, they also end up having a small team as a result.
Maybe it's got to be both.
Maybe it has to be both.
Self-published and it needs to be a small team. But the thing is, it's so arbitrary. It's like, where do you draw the line? What is a small team?
What if it's self-published by 5 people who made the game all by themselves, but all happen to be independently extremely wealthy, and they just dumped millions of dollars into this game? Is that still indie?
Right. Yeah. It really is like, it's crazy.
I think it's got to be the budget. I think we've got to draw the line at the budget.
That's kind of where I've come to as well. But I still think that even that maybe doesn't fully hold up.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It might not.
Let's see if a fat cat from Sweden can help us out.
Let's see.
Fat Cat says, indie games don't per se need to be self-published, but their development needs to be independent from publisher interference. So and that's kind of what I was getting at earlier, like say Roller Coaster Tycoon. Like doesn't necessarily have to be self-published, but the development needs to be independent. Okay, yeah.
What does that mean, independent? Does that mean independent of like monetary assistance?
Maybe that, or like, hey, you need to make the game this way so it'll sell well. They're like, say it was calculated by some big company or something.
Does Dave the Diver fit that definition then? We don't know really, but
we don't know. I would assume that we know that they had a bunch of money and stuff.
Yeah.
So it definitely that wouldn't be independent from publisher interference because it would have been having the money put towards.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, is that interference, or is it like you said? Is it like the direction of the game is free from interference?
It's really, we don't really know. Yeah. We don't really know
because I don't get the impression. I don't get the impression playing through Dave the Diver that some company was like. I mean, it just doesn't feel like a predatory, like...
It doesn't have loot boxes.
It doesn't have loot boxes.
It doesn't have a season pass.
Right. Now, it feels very wholesome, in that regard.
Right.
And again, I have decided that I don't think it's an indie game. I just don't want to crap on this game.
No, and I don't think it has anything... That's what Daniel's upset, because he's worried that the game is going to go down in history as being the game that was caught up into this controversy.
Yes, I am.
And I don't think that's it. I really don't. I mean, yeah, it sucks that it was this game that gets chosen to be in the center of this controversy. But I think the conversation needs to happen because we haven't really, this conversation hasn't really come up before, in at least the same way. It feels like this is a at least if it's not a new conversation, at least more people are talking about it, which I think is important.
Yeah, I do too. Also, when we say published independently, like can a team or can a studio who develops their game independently, publishes it independently, and grows, can they ever get too big to be an independent publisher?
They have to. Yeah, exactly. That happens.
I mean...
Every company starts out small, right?
I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, think about like Supergiant Games, I think is what it's called. Are they the Hades people? Supergiant? Mm-hmm. Like, they knock everything out of the park. Like everything they do is great. When they drop Hades 2, it's going to be huge.
It's not an indie, right? Yeah.
I thought it was.
Or, like you're right. You're a good point. I mean, like there has to be a point. There has to be a cutoff point.
Yacht Club. Yeah. Everything they drop is great.
Yeah.
When do they get too big for their britches?
Exactly. It's a good point. It's a really good point. So we got a comment from Larry House who said, looked up the definition, a game created by individuals or a small development team. No other way to really put it. I agree with that. And that's kind of like saying, like, if it's created, this has nothing to do with who publishes it.
Yeah.
If it's created by a small development team or individuals. That's a really clean way of doing it, but it leaves open the option for, like, say Nintendo sets out 3 or 4 people to say, okay, make a game for us. Well, you guys just do your own thing and make a little game. And we've had that before. We've had, like Nintendo do that with, like, say that jump rope game that came out on Switch. It was made by a couple people, published by Nintendo on Switch.
With $100 million budget.
Yeah, and no, it definitely did not. It probably had a $0 budget, essentially. Is that an indie game? Is the jump rope game an indie game?
I don't know. I don't even know anymore.
I don't even know.
What I'm just running through all these different teams now in my head, like Devolver Digital, like man.
Yeah, I mean there is some sort of line, and it's like you almost have to do we'll get to that in a minute because there's a comment that kind of goes over it that I think probably says it better than I could say.
I mean, I don't know. Not only do I not know where to draw the line anymore, I don't know what to draw the line with. Like, I don't know.
A big marker.
Know nothing.
A big marker.
What kind of marker?
I'm going to say, like, you got to go Crayola. Like, get a big old Crayola marker.
What flavor?
Crayola markers aren't flavored, man. You don't need to be tasting them. They might be flavored, but you're not supposed to eat them.
You're telling me you never, like, took a pull off one of them grape Crayolas?
Grape Crayolas? You mean a purple Crayola?
Well...
Let's move on to
everybody has gaps in their knowledge, right?
That's right. Everyone has a gap in their knowledge.
Yeah. I mean, like the Crayola 64 flavor box back in the day that had the sharpener built in.
Mm-hmm. Those are crayons.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That one G guy said,
one guy.
that one good guy said, if it started as a project someone wants to do for fun or for a community rather than to make money, I think that's I like your idea there. You know, it's an indie if it was a project put together for the love of doing the project, not to make money.
That's just so subjective.
It's just so subjective. I like the idea of that, but you can't use that as your defining factor because it's just so subjective.
Yeah, anybody could claim that at that point. You know,
right. You could claim that like Tears of the Kingdom was a game made because they just really wanted to make it, and it was for the community, and it was for fun, and it wasn't to make money. They just happened to make a bunch of money off of it.
Honestly, we just really wanted to make Fortnite.
Right.
Like Fortnite was a passion project.
Fortnite may have been a passion project.
It may have been
because it blew up. I mean, it wasn't like it was a big game to begin with.
We sat down. When we sat down, we didn't intend to make the next Call of Duty.
It'd be like Fortnite season 15 was really just a passion project.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. We got a comment from somebody that I haven't seen pop up in a hot minute here. We got Celeria Rose, so welcome back to the podcast. And here's a big meaty comment from Celeria Rose, who said...
it's edited. I actually took some of it out because I wanted to talk about this stuff specifically.
All right, so Celeria said, the challenge is there is a technical definition and there is a public perception. Technically, an indie game is literally just an independent game, meaning that as long as the game is self-published, it's indie. But by that idea, meaning big name games would be indie since the large company behind them publishes their own titles. Perception-wise, indie basically has come to mean smaller teams making more moderate to small games, but even that gets fuzzy as some indie games can get pretty large in and of themselves. So it really is just a know it when you see it kind of situation because it doesn't really follow a set idea at this point.
And you know what? You're right. It kind of is like a combination of a bunch of different factors, and you have to weigh them all individually and decide, is this an indie game or is it not?
We need a formula. We need a weighted formula.
That's like, is it self-published? Okay, it doesn't have to be, but it really helps it give it points. Like once you hit a certain threshold.
A rubric.
A rubric. An indie rubric. That's what we need.
I'm going to make an indie rubric.
It's like, what was the budget? If the smaller the budget, the more points you get.
Yeah.
And then finally, it's like, how many people were on the team? The less, the more points you get. And then there you go.
I might design an indie rubric and put an end to this crap.
Dude, you do it. You're gonna revolutionize indie gaming forever. And then send it to Jeff Keighley and say, here you go, Jeff.
And say
next year.
Say this is from Gaming Gig.
This is from Gaming Gig. We created this for you so that next year you never have to worry about this. The only games, they have to pass the rubric first. And then if they pass the rubric, then they can be nominated for Game of the Year.
It wouldn't be the first rubric I've made, that's for sure.
No, it would not.
I am a fairly experienced rubric maker at this point. Be on the lookout.
No. Be on the lookout, guys. He's making his indie rubric. That's hilarious. All right, we got one more comment here from Guy. Guy said, I think it was a lot easier to define what was an indie and what was AAA back in the day, but now that budgets and development costs have ballooned so much, it's hard to draw a definitive line for games caught in the middle. And that's what we have here.
Yeah.
We have a game kind of caught in the middle in terms of Dave the Diver. Obviously, it had a fairly large budget, but it was made by a smaller team, and it just has hit this weird, it has landed right on the line to the point to where people just don't know if it's an indie or not.
Yeah. And, we've talked a lot about how could they make it right? How do they protect their legacy here?
Who, Dave the Diver?
Yeah, Dave. Yeah. How does Dave protect his legacy? Dave, Boncho, all the characters. How do they protect their legacy? And, you brought up something that made me kind of sad, but I've pondered it for the past 30 minutes, and maybe it's the right thing.
And you saying, when I said that if they really wanted to, they could say, like, we withdraw ourselves from the category, which I do think would be one. I think that'd be a pretty baller move to do.
It'd be pretty classy.
Yeah. If they were like, look, no, because what you don't want is you don't want Dave the Diver. They don't need to win.
I know. What if it wins?
They don't need to win. They don't need to win.
Talk about sullying your reputation there.
Yeah, because if they win,
through no fault of your own.
Yeah, it's like they've created a game that people love. Tons of people love this game, and if they win the category, it's going to feel very disrespectful to true little indie studios.
Yeah,
and then it's not going to help them. I mean, it may. I don't know. A controversy, they say, helps everything, but I think that they probably don't want to win. If I were them, I would not want to win. But that's just me.
Yeah, no, I don't want them to win because I think Sea of Stars is better. But I also don't want them to win because I love this game and I don't want it to go down in history as the game that ruined the indie category.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But but it could happen.
It could happen.
I'm telling
it
you,
totally
it could happen.
It could happen.
It's between two games, I think. I mean,
I don't know, you haven't played Cocoon yet.
I haven't
that
played
game was
Cocoon.
phenomenal.
Well, that's true. I haven't played Cocoon. Maybe I'll try to sample it, before. But and I haven't played Viewfinder. But I have played Dredge and Sea of Stars and Dave the Diver. And I think it's going to come down to those two.
Well, and it might. But if I were them, I wouldn't want to win.
Sabotage Studio, that's another one.
You're looking up another.
Well, I was trying to figure out what the budget was for Sea of Stars. That's what I was trying to.
Daniel, I've come to the conclusion that I need you to make an indie rubric.
I'm going to make it.
You need to make it and decide what are the different things that could qualify you as being an indie. And if you check all the boxes, or you don't even have to check all the boxes, because like we said, I don't think you necessarily have to be self-published to be an indie.
Mm-hmm. But it helps.
But it helps a lot. I don't think you necessarily have to have a small team to be an indie, but it helps.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the budget, I do think, needs to be relatively small. But as someone brought up, I think it was Guy at the end saying, development costs have ballooned so much that, what is an indie? Other games cost $100 million to make, but your game only costs $1 million to make. That's, a hundredth of the budget.
Right.
Is that an indie?
Should it be a ratio?
Right.
Or should it be some sort of fraction as opposed to
what you do is you take
a number.
You take the most recent, in terms of your rubric, you take the budget for the most recent Grand Theft Auto game or the most recent Call of Duty game. And then that's what you base it on. It's like, does your game fall into less than 5% of the budget of the most recent Call of Duty game? And if it's under 5% of the budget for the most recent Call of Duty game, it gets it points.
Have we decided right here that Call of Duty is the anti-indie?
Well,
is the antithesis of all that indie embodies?
I think,
is it Call of Duty? I think it might be.
I think it might be Call of Duty. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Call of Duty. Yeah. That's it. So I haven't found like the budget for Sea of Stars, but they did do a Kickstarter campaign for this game.
Okay.
Very indie idea.
Very indie.
That's bonus points on the rubric.
And did have a Kickstarter.
Their goal was 133,000 Canadian dollars, and they raised 1.6 million Canadian dollars.
Okay, so yeah.
So, but the goal was 133,000.
Right.
That's what they were asking, to make the game, essentially. Mm-hmm. If I'm interpreting this on Kickstarter correctly.
Mm-hmm. But you can't tell me they didn't use all that money. They did.
It felt like they did.
Yeah.
I mean,
Sea of Stars got a fairly good push.
But if the money was raised independently,
yeah,
how much money can you raise before you've raised too much?
That's going to be on the rubric.
Be on the lookout.
I think it needs to be a percentage based on what the most recent Call of Duty game was.
Was your budget this far above the?
Because Call of Duty is a yearly game, so its budget is going to stay with inflation. So you can use it as a baseline.
What is the newest Call of Duty called?
Modern Warfare 3. And it just came out. But, I don't know, it may be a bad one to look at because that one started, it was supposed to be a side mode. It wasn't supposed to be a full game, but what's the budget?
The first article I found, the title says, despite $1 billion budget, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 had, and then it goes ... I think it had about
No way, it had $1 billion.
I think it had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of $1 million budget.
I don't doubt that. I don't think it had $1 billion.
Okay, here
budget.
I'm seeing.
I don't think it had $1 billion budget. I really don't.
I'm hearing somebody say, "Do you think it's around 300 million?" Somebody else said, "Maybe it's around 100 million."
Yeah.
Somebody else is saying oh my god, a list of the most expensive video games ever created, but it's from 2018. Bruh, Call of Duty. Wait.
This is the second Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3.
Yeah.
Because they've redone the series.
They spent $250 million making the first one. Grand Theft Auto 5, $265 million.
Yeah. Yeah.
Destiny, $140 million.
I mean, like, there are lots of games that over 100 million is not uncommon at all today. Like, not uncommon at all.
Final Fantasy VII, $145 million.
And that was back in the day.
Yeah. I mean, that's PS1.
Is that okay. I assume that's not the remake.
No, because this list, no. This is Well, actually, when did that come out? It didn't come out in 2018.
No, that came out in like 2021.
Yeah, so this article predates the remake. So
Yeah. Okay.
I'm telling you what, guys, I think we've solved nothing, and yet we've solved everything. Be on the lookout for a hell of a rubric.
Right. The indie rubric is coming up. Mm-hmm. All right. So
when do we debut it?
we can debut on episode 100 of the Gaming Gig podcast coming up. This is episode 97.
That is so cool.
All right. So last segment of the podcast is the 3 for Dale Club. If you hung out with us this entire time while we just made no progress on discovering what an indie game was,
I've made progress internally.
well, good for you. If you hung out with us this entire time, we want to celebrate you and shout you out at the end of the next podcast, and we do that through our 3 for Dale Club.
That's right. The 3 for Dale Club, it's a very exclusive club. You got to listen to us talk crap for so long. So all you got to do to join, okay, is drop us a comment that says 3 for Dale. Say whatever else you want to say, but make sure you include our code phrase, 3 for Dale.
Yep. That lets us know that you made it to the end, and we'll shout you out. Today, we're starting things off with Mr. Tom Derry, who got his 3 for Dale in very last second, right as I was making this outline. So
Yeah, he got it in on Discord, too.
he did it both ways.
Oh, did you do it both ways?
He wanted to make sure
Okay.
he was there.
I saw it on Discord.
Yeah, he put it in Discord. He put it in on YouTube just to make sure he was there. Well, we got you.
Nice. Next up, we got D18, who said Omaha for Daniel. That's right. That's a Peyton Manning thing.
That's between you and D18.
Yeah.
They got a Peyton Manning thing going on now. Next, we got Guy, who, now we got a comment here about our last podcast, which is on the PlayStation Portal. Go back and watch that. Mm-hmm. Guy says about the PlayStation Portal, I will admit that I was definitely tempted by the idea of the Portal, but now I might just have to try out remote play on my Steam Deck instead and see how it runs.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's not a bad idea. I mean, for $200, like the Portal probably would be better, honestly. But for $200, you have to decide, is it worth it for you? Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah.
And by the way, I just wanted to touch on something Randy said. It would be impossible for your 3 for Dale Club on this episode to be about this episode. So if we're referencing something, it's probably last week. Just so you know.
just so you know.
Next up, we got Kitaclysm. Kitaclysm said, I don't really have much to say on the subject of the Portal and remote play and all that, as I'm an Xbox player and don't do much with remote play myself. My only real contribution here is 3 for freaking Dale.
That's all you need. What other contribution do you need?
That's all I need.
That's the most important thing in the world. All right, next we got Landon Stallings. Landon said, Sea of Stars got me back into JRPGs after a year or two hiatus. Almost done with Live Alive, playing Star Ocean, the second story R next.
Very cool.
And on a kick.
That's a kick.
On a kick.
Yeah. Speaking of JRPGs, that Dragon Quest experiment is in my future. It's coming up.
Do you know which one you're going to do?
I'm going to play the demo of the new one and see if I like it. And then
I played the demo and it was very cool. Wasn't my cup of tea, but you may love it.
Yeah. I think I might, but we'll see. I'm going to go into it expecting to love it.
I realize I have a typo on this next. There should be a G at the end of old Benjamin's name.
All right. Next up, we got a comment from Benjamin Darlin. That's great. That's Randy's redneck coming out.
Yep.
Benjamin said, as someone with a Steam Deck and a Switch Lite alongside my PS5, there really was no reason to get a portable. Rather, spend that $200 on additional games. I think you're right.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
For the record.
I mean, I think the Portal's cool. Is it worth $200? Like, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think it's cool too. But, you're right, man.
I don't know what I would...
Enjoy your games.
I don't know what it would need to be for me to be like, yeah, dude, it's like no question and go buy one.
If it had a direct connection and didn't go through Wi-Fi all the time, that's what...
That would be it. If it was a Wii U tablet.
If it was a Wii U gamepad.
Yeah. All right. Finally, we got Laninator, who said, I cannot believe the Portal, a device whose primary use case is to stream over Wi-Fi, doesn't support Wi-Fi 6.
Yeah.
I agree. But, there was a guy in the comments who brought up some points like, yeah, but it really wouldn't even help it that much. Like, it's kind of like, it would be cool, but it'd be kind of pointless. Like, I don't know. There was a bunch of technical jargon they went over saying that, the Portal couldn't even use the extra bandwidth that Wi-Fi 6 would offer. So, there's no point in it.
Okay.
So maybe he's right.
Yeah, I mean, there's always some sort of technical jargon that me and Randy ain't going to get. We're swayed by headlines. We were born in the kudzu.
Yeah.
We hear a higher number. We think it's better.
Definitely, yeah.
Somebody even got in there and said something about that Wi-Fi 7 is a thing. I don't even know if that's true. I just
Sounds good.
I just said, wow, I didn't know that. Sick. I don't know if he's right or not. I have no reason to say he's not. So... the point was that if you wanted to be future-proofed, 6 wouldn't even go far enough, was his point. And maybe he's right. Again,
Still, I think like it should have had what I consider to be like the newfangled thing.
Yeah, I wish I'm gonna be honest with you. I wish they put Wi-Fi 10 in it and Bluetooth anything.
Yeah, just any sort of Bluetooth would be nice.
Anyway,
but well, guys, that gets us to the end. So until next time, I'm Randy,
which makes me Daniel.
and this has been Gaming Gig.
Peace out.